Okay, I think we are going to get started. So first of all, thank you all for taking the time to join and check this out. I know Thursday afternoon are generally chaos, so we appreciate you spending the hour with us, and we plan to make it worth it. Today, we are going to talk about modeling bill impact specifically on lower income customers. And with you here today is myself. I'm Tomer Borenstein. I'm the CTO and co-founder here at BlastPoint. We are a customer intelligence platform for utilities. And with me here is Tom Hines. I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi, Tomer. Hi, everybody. It's nice to be here. I'm Tom Hines. I'm one of the principals and co-founders of Tierra Resource Consultants, and we consult with utilities across the country in terms of their energy efficiency and demand-side management program profiles and portfolios. It's great to be here.
Yeah, appreciate Tom, who really is an expert in rate design and program design, to have with us here today to talk about some of this cool stuff. So we'll take this in four pieces, starting with the affordability crisis that I think we are all familiar with, but just as a point of illustration, we've got We Energies here, who has been in continuous contested rate case litigation since 2023. Really, a lot of that around affordability. They have another case going public to public hearing next week. And specifically, the reason why we thought this was an interesting story to feature here is that legislators actually tried to cap energy bills at 2% of income. And while that bill died in March, the question itself didn't. And one of the things that BlastPoint has done in Pressure Point, which is again that free tool that is currently in the chat that you can check out and look up your utility, is we have looked at essentially rates versus vulnerability of the population in terms of percent of population under the poverty threshold. And what you're seeing here is a graph of all of those utilities plotted. The bigger ones are larger utilities. The smaller dots are regional utilities, and they are plotted on the x-axis on their effective electricity rate, and on the y-axis, the poverty of the service territory, how many people fall below the poverty threshold. And the interesting thing that I want to point out is that 68 of the most exposed utilities actually charge at or below average. So affordability is not just a rate problem, it's a who are your customers problem as well. And in fact, if we just quantify this, the point is that below average rates are not a defense, because if you are a utility that has rates that are below average, there's still a 1 in 3 chance that you're already in the top two pressure tiers. Tom, I'm curious if you can add a little bit of color on how much does this story make it into some of these hearings and commissions when we're looking, not just at how high your rate is, but beginning to go beyond that and peeling the onion layer by layer.
Yeah, I think advocates are getting more and more savvy about bringing these issues up in rate cases and explaining that we need to be addressing customers who are all the way across the spectrum, and that looking at average bill impacts is not good enough anymore. And that, really, it's not just your rates, it's your customer's ability to afford the cost of energy. And in utility service territories that have more extreme weather, you've got more concerns about reliability, resiliency. I live in Arizona, and so we certainly worry about shutoffs during the summer months and the concern about resiliency and safety, health and safety as a result. And so these things get sort of oversized importance in a rate case when you're thinking about things like health, safety, resiliency, and affordability across some customers who are challenged.
Hmm. Absolutely. And, you know, part of the point that we're really trying to make with this webinar today is that these commissions are becoming more savvy and they want to see things, or at least are going to ask questions that you are going to want to at least have good answers to and not be surprised by some of those questions. And this is something that is already making itself into law in California right now. It's a binding requirement in every major rate case filing since 2022 to show how rate increases land on your lowest income customers. And part of what we wanted to do with this webinar is really visualize what that actually looks like when you are talking about how your rate is going to impact the various customer segments that you serve. Because like Tom mentioned, interveners now arrive with things like household level income estimates and questions about enrollment gap analysis. Who of your customers is eligible but not yet enrolled, and why? What have you done to make sure that they do get enrolled? And actually, on average, and this changes utility to utility, but only 1 in 6 of eligible customers typically actually gets on the assistance programs that they need. Tom, what else are you seeing in terms of just the questions, the tools that people are using and asking?
There's a lot of concern about cross-subsidization, right? That what's actually maybe happening in many utility territories is that customers who can afford to make investments in their homes are taking advantage of energy efficiency programs that are being funded by, rates with customers who are less able to afford those improvements. And so I think this is something that has been increasing in the noise we hear around affordability is how are we doing a better job of targeting, not just offering programs, but targeting them and engaging with the right customers who benefit most.
Absolutely. And in order to visualize just what this bill impact modeling looks like, just to keep it simple, a bill is typically more than just two numbers, but they generally fall into the fixed charge and the usage, right? Realize that this is an oversimplification and that it gets more involved than that. But if we just, as the physicists say, if the cow was a sphere, this is what a rate looks like at the very basic level. And at BlastPoint, one of the things that we do a lot is helping utilities engage with lower income households. And one of the things that we know from the data is that just because two households have the same the same income, doesn't mean that they are, the same kind of customer, have the same need, or more importantly, will be impacted by your rate in the same way. So we've got two example illustrative households and the average customer here. We've got Maria, who is living in a small apartment, working two jobs. Her income annually is 38K, and she uses about 420 kilowatt hours per month. Versus the Johnsons, who live in an older house, they're owners, they have electric heat, but they have the same income. But because it's a bigger house, because it is an older home, their energy usage tends to be higher, right? And right now, their bills and their usage looks like this, where Maria is well below the average customer and the Johnsons are well above. And as we're sliding and really designing our rate, this is a simplified design where I just move things to the right or to the left in order to move money between the fixed charge and the usage charge. But you can see that the same movement of the same rate is actually having the opposite impacts on two customers that have the same income. So just having income and knowing who is income eligible is no longer enough when you're proposing a new rate case. Tom, anything you'd add here?
that the average does not do a great job of representing the individual customers. And that is where you find utilities have often brought to the rate case an average bill impact by segment, and that is being torn apart in rate cases across the country right now. That you're not being granular enough and you're missing the real impacts on real customers, depending. And I thought your example is such a perfect way of showing that the same increase in total can affect two customers with the exact same income very differently in terms of their lifestyles, their energy use habits, and the efficiency of their premises, right? So that's the key, I think, here is that average is not telling the story well enough, and we have to be careful of that.
Absolutely. And to build on that, I think to myself as a data scientist, which is what I am by training, one of the things that I've seen utilities do, and it made sense for them to do that, is to bring census block level, census tract level data to show, here's the usage, here's the income, but you cannot do that kind of math in this aggregate level because you could have, those things are not independent, and you could have these two households hiding within that average, and the answer ends up looking like nothing moved, right? And so, to your point, we also need better tools and better data at a more granular level, specifically household level data as well, in order to be able to do this kind of stuff. Where I think historically the industry has relied more on these geographic aggregate statistics to make their cases, and like you said, right now that's getting torn apart. So this is an illustrative example of these two households. But the cool thing happens, and this is based on a real utility anonymized data, where we took a utility with their residential customer base and essentially segmented all of the customers based on bill impact, right? Because now what you can do, and you'll see the income based levels here and how they all change together when I start to move this slider. But the point is that we have quantified the small homes and apartments and the older and larger homes who are both lower income. And this is just two segments out of a variety of segments that we could pull out here. But the point is that as we are changing the sliders and proposing changes to our rates, we can show on a segment by segment basis, and specifically within the segment of low income, which tends to be this very monolithic segment in concept, but when you get into it, it ends up being lots of different households, lots of different types of humans and families in those lower income households. Not to mention, the messy middle, the people who aren't income eligible and are struggling, right? The commissioners are starting to want to see how you are driving with them. So really part of what we wanted to do today is to show you, beyond just talking about conceptually about bill impact modeling, which sounds great, specifically what it looks like. And the nice thing is that in order to get started, you don't need a lot, right? You need income and usage at the very least, but beyond that, everything else is gravy. And there's some additional cool stuff that we'll talk about that utilities are doing with that data beyond just this type of model. Tom, you mentioned that filings are getting picked apart and are facing increased scrutiny and with better tools. So I'm wondering if you can go into a little bit more detail about what are some of the pitfalls. We touched a little bit about the granularity gap and the bill impact gap. What else are you seeing?
So, I mean, first of all, the granularity gap in saying developing out by customer segment or by zip code or by rate class, which is what I've typically seen a lot. Developing out bill impacts by those criteria is not granular enough. and you're then faced with this issue of someone bringing more granular data and you needing to defend against that, which puts you in a defense mode, right? So you don't want to be there. You need to do the work here to create better examples of different personas, the same kind of personas that you just did. Where do customers fit into those different buckets? And then what does that look like from a bill impact perspective, right, for those different personas? And then what are you doing about it in terms of engaging, right? Where are those customers in terms of eligibility? And then where are your programs in terms of reaching out and how many of the eligible customers are actually engaged and participating? That gives you a much more holistic view. We all know that prices are going up, but how can you help make sure that bill impacts aren't going up and that you're doing everything you can as a utility to support customers, knowing that the price of everything in our world is going up? And so how are we going to address that? What are we doing about it is, I think, the key question to ask.
Tom, what are some of the things that utilities can do to close that engagement gap? Because I know that's one of the hardest things. Utility customers are notoriously hard to engage as it is. Utility customers who are struggling are even harder to engage with. And I think back to this research from the Smart Energy Consumer Collaborative from a few years back when they looked at the reasons why customers aren't engaging with their assistance programs. And number one was awareness. Number two was the paperwork barrier. Number three was stigma. But what can utilities do?
Well, it's one of the reasons that we've been engaged with BlastPoint is thinking about this in a different way, is that we can't use one size fits all message to be promoting programs and building trust with customers around what are the benefits and why do I want to participate? How do I participate? How do we make it easier? How do we reduce friction to become involved in programs, understand the right programs that target the right customers? It's it's detailed work, but it's the right work that we need to be doing to understand. So again, it's one thing to offer a program. It's an entirely different thing to think about who are the customers that are most likely to be engaged? Who are the customers that are going to be more difficult to reach? What are the current touch points that I have across all the things I do with customers that I can be using those touch points so that I'm not recreating the wheel, but actually engaging better with customers when they have an educatable moment? It's really important that we meet customers where they are in terms of, are you having trouble paying your bill? Let's channel you into some bill assistance, some better support, so that we're not just creating payment arrangements, but we're actually solving the challenges that are underneath those payment challenges, and
Yeah,
that's
and
how we really close that engagement gap.
I love that because then you can come back to this kind of model when you're speaking with the regulators and you can say, well, let's say that we are going to change our rate in this particular direction. We're taking care of these small homes and apartments because they are a larger group. It's a little bit of a small text, but there's about 73,000 of them versus these older, larger home, which is not a small group by any means, right? It's still, over 40,000 customers. But for these, we've identified this half of them that are most likely to engage with energy efficiency because of what we know about their home and their other program engagement. And so while we're changing the bill in this way and it'll impact these customers that way, here's what we're doing to close that gap. Am I thinking about this right, Tom?
Absolutely. And I really like to think about both energy efficiency and load management opportunities, right? A lot of this is the profile of how you use energy, not just how much you use, but how you use it. And that combination can be really powerful. So again, it's also bundling, not just looking at one opportunity, but what's a holistic set of the right program opportunities that fit that customer persona and their premise, really, because a lot of this comes down to premise.
100%. Um, I think, one of our kind of key, if this is what you leave the webinar with, is that The model is the easy part. You have a lot of the data that you already need. We can certainly talk about income data. There's definitely gremlins and third-party estimated income data, unless you are the IRS. But generally, there are tools to allow you to get both of these pieces. You certainly have the usage data already, and what we're encouraging everyone to do is to start to do this analysis no matter how far away your next rate case is, because it's not just about having the data, it's also being able to take that data, turn it into a plan, and start acting on that plan so that when you're having your rate case and you're coming with some proof that things are already moving in that particular direction. Obviously, that depends on how far away your rate case is. And Tom, just to dive in a little bit more about what you said about the different programs on demand side, as well as energy efficiency, and maybe anything else. What does a well-prepared utility look like from a program portfolio design?
Yeah, I think this is where, like, let's take it into a strategy discussion, right? Which is, and obviously I consult on DSM programs, but they become an oversized issue in rate cases if you're not careful, right? They can either become part of the solution or they can become the sort of hornet's nest that you're getting pulled into if you're not prepared. And so I think a well prepared utility walks into the room with a good understanding of a defensible position of how I've helped from sort of a long term perspective make sure that I'm doing everything I can to keep rates as low as possible. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in terms of rate relief. And then what am I doing? You have to acknowledge the fact that higher energy costs are going to create higher potential bill impacts for customers, and not hide from that, but lean into how you're going to be working with customers to identify customers who are most at risk of affordability challenges, not only today, but with new rates, and how you're working to channel them into programs that make sense for them, both in terms of bill assistance and longer term bill relief by improving efficiency of their dwellings, by working with them around lifestyle changes that in the way they use energy that match their lifestyle, but do a better job of managing their energy use to reduce consumption at peak times, take advantage of any kind of rates that are available that can, reduce their bills while not changing their total consumption. And so I think those are two things to think about as you walk into the hearing room. And so the way that Tierra has been thinking about this has been that, programs in today's world, right? We see affordability challenges across the country. And I think a lot of regulators are seeing the impacts of the programs and the funding for programs as a potential cost to cut. Often DSM programs are funded through a specific line item on the bill, whether it's a system benefits charge or a demand side management program adjuster charge. They are more visible than many charges on the bill. And so there tends to be this tendency for regulators to look at that and see it as an opportunity to reduce rates. And the challenge there, as I know folks who are practitioners at DSM understand, that small amount that we're paying is what's providing a toolkit for the utility to help with long-term rate relief and short-term bill relief. And so I think currently the current cost effectiveness tests that we see out there, total resource cost tests, societal benefits tests, they're often misunderstood by regulators. They're hard to understand in how those tests, a good result on those tests, results in better outcomes for customers. And so we need to do a better job as an industry of explaining that. And so what Tierra's developed is kind of a two-in-one index. And on the left-hand side of that index is rate relief. And we think of rate relief as long-term downward pressure on rates. And when you think about customers adopting new DERs like batteries and EVs, those have impacts on the grid. And if we work with customers as they're adopting those to do better management of those loads, then we are better utilizing our infrastructure. We're selling more KWH, but we're not necessarily creating higher KW peaks by better spreading out those loads, better utilizing the infrastructure. And in those cases, we actually put downward pressure on rates over the long term. And so, as typically higher income customers are adopting those DERs, it really makes sense to be working with those customers to ensure that we're managing those load impacts and we're bringing value to every customer on the grid from those investments. And that's your long term rate relief. On the other hand, you need a portfolio that's also driving short term bill relief. And in particular, for limited income, for the messy middle, as we call it, those customers who may not qualify for limited income weatherization, but still struggle to pay their bills, as well as customers in multifamily properties, for schools, for other customer segments that really need that short range bill relief. How are we channeling them into the right programs? Energy efficiency, as I mentioned earlier, that like load management around rates with energy efficiency can be a really powerful mix. And so what Tierra's developed is an index that you can use to view your portfolio and also use to tell the story of your portfolio to regulators. It shows the size and the relative impact on rates and bills for each and every program. And you can do kind of a plot chart of this and show that your portfolio is targeted to the right segments and has a balance between the rate relief type programs and bill relief. It helps you defend against the cross subsidy discussion and concerns. It helps you explain how you're going to work with customers who are going to be most affected by higher rates in terms of your bill relief programs, and how you're going to work long term to make sure that you're ameliorating future rate impacts with rate relief. And so the right portfolio has a mix of both. In the chat, we put some information about rate relief and bill relief index, and it'd be interesting to for folks to, if you have any interest in it, we'd love to talk to you about how this can help you in a rate case to show how these are tools for both short-term and long-term bill relief for customers and not a cost line item to be reduced in a rate case.
This is so interesting and helpful. I think, Tom, one of the things I'm taking away from this is just, um, you know, you want to address your affordability crisis. You want to lower the amount of bad debt and reduce write-offs. It's not just about engaging the people who are struggling, right? It's engaging the entire customer base and meeting them where they are in a way that can help them help kind of the collective here. And so this idea of having the right programs, and they're not always, assistance programs, right? It's some of this other stuff that can help make the entire utility and the entire customer base just healthier overall. So great stuff. Um, I think what we want for our utility partners when they walk into their rate case is the ability to say that we know who our financially exposed customers are. We know what this rate design does to their bills at this very granular level. We know how many of them are already in our programs and how many aren't. And that includes not just the people who are struggling to pay, right? But it's all this other potential to address this problem holistically. What about our, high income customers? How many of those who we think are actually likely to enroll in some of these rate relief segments programs are actually enrolled with them? And what are we doing to reach out to them as well? And what we're doing to close that gap? And in addition to the DSM programs, some if you're already digging deeper into your premises and your customers with household level data, there's additional stuff that you can do, which is, shameless plug, BlastPoint's bread and butter. But in general, the ability to model who's headed for uh, delinquency and who's going to struggle to pay their bill, whether they are low income or not, right? Because how else would you find those customers who aren't eligible but are at risk? So having some model of risk to pay, the propensity to pay on the other side of our arrears, which customers are most likely to pay, which customers are most likely to be written off, so that we can help those customers engage with the right programs now, reduce the future write-offs, right? Being able to say that, the people who aren't delinquent yet, but have a high propensity to write off if they do become delinquent, is another data point that you can bring to the rate case and say, we quantified all of this because we knew that it would become something that we have to pass on to the rest of our customers here. And we proactively went and reduced that risk. Therefore, this is a well thought out rate case. And then channel propensity, also understanding where to engage with these customers because they are notoriously hard to engage. They need the right message. They need the right channel. I think there was a really interesting comment in the Q&A that there have been some success on increasing low-income enrollment by changing the message to comfort and deal or discount to battle some of that stigma around customer hesitation to enroll in programs. So thinking beyond just the numbers, but also thinking about who are these customers? How do we engage with them in a way that makes sense for them? And how do we do that in a way that is scalable as a utility so that it's something that we can literally work into our rate case? And then the the capability you gain by doing all of that is to say that we measured the bill impact by segment, under every proposed design. We are closing the gap on all of the programs that can help support, lower, more predictable bills to our customers, whether it is assistance or otherwise. And we have continuously made the ask smaller by actually enrolling more customers in DSM, EE, other type of stuff that helps this model perform better. And you kind of come with the receipts, which hopefully will make for a much smoother rate case.
And Tomer, what we like to do is have some very specific examples on that we're closing the gap. A smart thermostat will save an average customer this much on their bill, and here's how much that reduces the rate, the impact of expected rate increase from a rate case. And so I think getting to the very specifics of pointing to things in the portfolio of specific technologies or energy efficiency improvements in a home or a business that help bridge that gap, it really closes the imagination gap also with regulators as to like how you're going to accomplish it.
Yeah, and even better to show that you've already done some of that successfully so that it's
Right.
not just hypothetical. Which brings me to this next slide, which is what should you do depending on how far away are you from your rate case? And so if you're 12 months plus out, you have time and you should go ahead and build that full stack. You want to start by auditing your data. What do you have access to? AMI, payment, enrollment data, income, and then essentially begin with segmenting by income and creating the bill impact model. And then, that's your baseline for that rate case. But beyond that, start to think about where are all of these relevant programs? How saturated are these programs? Which are questions you can answer if you have a sense of the propensity of existing customers to enroll in these programs, right? If you're only 6 to 12 months out, you probably have the data, and it's really a matter of just getting it all together. Um, uh, maybe not all the propensity models within that amount of time, but a basic understanding of how the rate that you're going to propose is going to impact the individuals in your customer base, and then aggregate that all up to show that you've done your homework. You have enough time for that. If it's under 6 months, I mean, I'm a big believer in moving fast, even in this industry, and whether or not this is something that you'll be able to get done in time for the next rate case. The following one after that is only a few years out from that. And these are things that take time, not just to build the models themselves, but to actually start to engage with your customers in this data-driven way that is directly tied to these rate designs and the customer needs. And you just want to start collecting that book of receipts of what you're doing, why you're doing it, quantifying it so that you can use it all in your rate case. So I know we are getting close to wrapping up here, but if there are five things that I would have you guys remember from the webinar is that number one, affordability is not a rate problem. I mean, it's not that rate isn't a part of it, but having below average rates just isn't cutting it, and it really comes down to who your customers are. And that question has moved, into the hearing room, and we all know once California does a thing, the rest of the states catch it as well. When we're talking about bill impact and bill, rate design impact, it's not just about income. It's about income and usage and the particular design and how that affects every single customer, every single premise individually. And your programs are your rate case armor, and beyond that, they are the tools that you have at your disposal to actually make a difference, in terms of lowering write-offs, lowering disconnections, lowering customers who are struggling to pay, and overall having that downward pressure on rate relief as well by engaging some of the other pieces of the customer base that can help by having the ability to invest in some of these technologies. And kind of the key final point here is to build before you file, which I think is probably a no-brainer. But the point is that you already have things to, at the very least, get this started. Beyond that, Tierra and BlastPoint are running an affordability readiness assessment. So there is a link in the chat right now that if you'd like to spend a little more time and dive into what this looks like for your utility specifically, please take a look at the link in the chat. We would love to chat with you. Tom, before I move to our Q&A section, any other thoughts before the Q&A section?
Just that I think, a really well prepared utility you could be bringing a proactive affordability customer engagement plan to your rate case as part of your initial testimony. Be proactive about this and actually show a plan towards understanding that there are going to be customer affordability implications of a rate increase. And here's the plan we have. Here's what we've already been doing about it. And here's what we plan to do more in this transition. And then I like how you put the DSM programs can be armor in your rate case. And you've really brought your armor forward there, and you're leading with it to really defend that we understand how to work with customers to lessen the impacts of the rate increases that we need to be a sustainable company. I really think that's today's rate case needs that proactive and affordability plan as part of it.
Absolutely. And I think we are going to open up to a few questions. We're going to have Jessica from our marketing team help us out with that.
Yes, thank you both for walking us through your perspective on how to approach rate case season. The first question that we have is, how long does it take to build a model like this?
Good question. I think it depends on where you're at with your data maturity, and I think it depends on how far in you want to go. But I think the key thing I really want people to take away is that you really need two pieces of data about your customers in order to have this kind of model, at least in the basic level, which is number one is usage, and having the more data about that, the better in terms of seasonal usage and how different things, that, but at the end of the day, it's usage, right? And income, right? Those are the two things that you need. Now, income data is challenging. You need to have a reliable source to get that income data from. Unless it's the IRS, which doesn't share income data at a granular level broadly, you're going to have to rely on some measure of modeled income data, which is acceptable to these commissions. What we have also done is just used other data. For example, the IRS does release income data at the county level, right? And calibrating that household level data to those ground truths that we do have as just an additional thing that you can do to make that data even stronger and more defensible. But at the end of the day, I guess what I'm trying to say is it shouldn't take that long, right? Because we're not talking about something that is, hundreds of data points. Of course, if you are there and you can, you want to invest in these propensity models and really getting the full picture, that will take some more time. And that depends on whether you have the capabilities in-house or whether you want to partner with someone like, again, this is what we do at BlastPoint to help you build that capability in-house so that you can do that moving forward. Even that, uh, doesn't take more than a few months. So not years, and certainly if you're 6 months or more away, there's lots you can do in the meantime.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes sense. Our next question is more around segmentation and how granular does the segmentation need to be to hold up under scrutiny?
Yeah, Tom, I'll hand this one to you.
Well, again, I've seen this where a lot of times utilities tend to calculate a lot of average rate impacts. And so that has worked for years in rate cases, but it's increasingly being shown to not really represent the ends of the spectrum, right? It just represents the median and not the ends of the spectrum. And the challenge with that is that not all impacts are created equally, as Tomer showed really well on that example. And so that's the first thing, is like being able to understand a better version of segmentation that incorporates a bit of more of a persona and premise basis that says, for customers who look like this is what bill impacts are likely to be. And then also segmentation, I think, from the perspective of who's eligible for your programs and who's actually participating in programs and why or why not, and what are the messages that best resonate with them. Those are the things that I'm excited about in the partnership that we have with BlastPoint, is to think through not just what programs you have in your portfolio, but how you're engaging and what channels you're using and what messaging you're using, and really making sure that you understand propensity. I think those are all important aspects of segmentation, in my opinion.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Our next question is around commission and cutting budgets and stuff. So our commission is actually cutting our EE and DSM budgets. How do we make the affordability argument when funding is shrinking?
Tom, I think that's a you question as
I'll
well.
start on this one, Tomer. That one sounds like, that's a softball for me, because that's exactly what we developed the rate relief index and the bill relief index for, is to be able to have better conversations with regulators. As I said, I feel like regulators are trying to do the right thing, and they may inadvertently be reducing the ability for customers to have tools to help them with affordability challenges. And so being able to come to them with a zero basis scale that says these programs are increasing affordability because of these things they're doing, and here's the definition behind it, and the way we can show the exact level that they're reducing bill impacts today and reducing rate impacts in the future. It really helps you show the value that you're getting for those very small dollars really in the portfolio. And so we didn't have time to go through all the details of the bill rate relief index and bill relief index, but they're built using the same kind of inputs in avoided cost value and customer and program costs but they change the perspectives so that they're easier for you to have conversations with regulators. I've tried doing these conversations for years, and regulators often don't understand the TRC and the societal cost test. And what we've done is just change the participant cost test and the ratepayer impact measure tests to be able to more clearly show how programs actually result in rate relief. And so, again, it's about changing the storyline that we're telling as far as why DSM matters and why that line item on the bill that looks attractive to decrease will actually move you in the wrong direction from affordability. That's a really important piece of this, and one that we'd love to talk to you about how rate relief and bill relief index can help.
Awesome. Thank you. I think our last question here is going back to the model, and our AMI rollout isn't complete. Are we still able to do something like this?
Yes, yes, certainly. Obviously, having AMI data is great if you have those sweet 15-minute interval data points. You can do lots of cool stuff with disaggregation, which can help with rate design. But you do not need to have AMI in order to do this. In fact, I would think that the first version of the model you would create for this would generally use average or seasonal usage on a month by month kind of basis, especially if the rate has a seasonal component or anything like that. But you could do this also with average monthly usage. And so, no, you do not need AMI to be fully rolled out to do this. Having additional data always opens and unlocks new doors and new insights. So it's always good, but it's not necessary here.
Sounds good. We did get one more that popped in here. Do you think that the argument of, for the cost of a cup of coffee a month per non-LI ratepayer can help you pay for LI customers to keep their lights on still holds up?
Tom, you're on the ground more than I am. What have you seen?
I think it does, but I think that there's a better argument to be made that says there are costs that we're going to reduce by helping those customers. And so you're not necessarily paying for that program when you look at it holistically in terms of reduced collections costs, reduced costs of disconnects and reconnects, and all of those things that we often don't account for. And I think if there's a better conversation to be had that says, when we think about things from a bill relief perspective long term, we're paying less than the avoided cost value for those grid services. And so they're not being subsidized. And then on the more of the direct bill relief side of it, it's we can help customers to be more affordable and reduce utility cost as a result of that. And so I think broadening our perspective to not just look at that one line item, but think about a better solution for customers with better outcomes that reduces overall cost of service is more, I think, today's message than the cup of coffee analogy that I've heard for years.
Love it.
Awesome. We did get one more, and it seems these are creating some additional thoughts here. Would you recommend that utilities include those reduced costs in testimony?
Tom, yep.
Yeah, I think that we need to make reference to those costs. Obviously, those costs are going to have to be in a range, right? Depending on what actual outcomes are from those things. But absolutely, we should not be hiding those real cost savings that can occur when we are solving problems instead of setting up payment arrangements over and over with the same customers. So absolutely, just need to have the normal amount of prudency to what the range, the accurate range is to report there. But absolutely, we need to bring those kind of arguments forward. Again, to think about it more holistically than just a simple line item on the bill that we're trying to reduce. What's the overall best solution for customers that reduces the cost of service is really the question we need to ask.
Awesome. Thank you. I think that covers it from the question side.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to thank you guys again today for taking the time and checking out this webinar. We hope this was helpful, and we'll be happy to share the materials, the interactive deck with the simulations in it. If that would be helpful, feel free to reach out. I wanted to say thank you to Tom Hines from Tierra Consulting. Thank you, Tom, for taking the time to do this with us. This was really awesome and fun. And like we said, if you are interested, we'll be happy to have a deeper discussion specifically on what this looks like for your utilities. Again, no commitment required from you besides being interested and wanting to chat more. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your week and weekend. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.